Abraham Lincoln wakes up on April 14th, 1865 and smiles. The war is over. The Union is saved. But he has no idea he has 14 hours left to live. The Civil War has ended. Just 5 days earlier, General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox. The Union is saved. The Confederacy is finished. For the first time in years, peace feels possible. At 7 a.m., Lincoln sits down for breakfast with his son, Captain Robert Lincoln. Robert has just returned from the front lines, and his father is glad to see him safe. The president smiles, more relaxed than usual, and says, "The war is now closed, and we will soon live in peace with the brave men that have been fighting with us." He encourages his son to leave the army, return to school, and think about a future in studying the law. For a brief moment, the burdens of the presidency seem lighter. The family feels whole again, and Lincoln allows himself to hope. By 9 a.m., he moves on to the day's work. He reads the morning papers, then meets with the Speaker of the House, Schuyler Colfax. Lincoln talks about bringing the South back into the Union. Colfax warns him not to move too quickly, but Lincoln listens quietly, then returns to his papers and letters. Outside the White House, the city is alive, but not everyone shares the same joy. Just a few blocks away, John Wilkes Booth is already awake. He is an actor, famous and admired, but also a man consumed by anger. The Confederacy has fallen, and in his eyes, Lincoln is to blame. That morning, as Lincoln dreams of peace, Booth begins to plan his act of violence. He is determined that, by nightfall, the president must die. At 11 a.m., Lincoln gathers with his cabinet for a scheduled meeting. General Grant joins them, as do most of the president's top advisors. As the meeting begins, the talks turn to reconstruction. The war is nearly over, and the question is how to reunite the nation. Some argue for punishment. Others want strict control over the defeated South, but Lincoln speaks with a softer voice. He talks about forgiveness, about kindness, about bringing people back into the Union without bitterness. He even speaks warmly of General Lee, the Confederate commander who had surrendered only days before. But at Mary Surratt's boarding house, John Wilkes Booth meets with his co-conspirators. Around a table, they divide their grim tasks. Booth will kill the president at Ford's Theater. Lewis Powell will attack Secretary of State William Seward in his bed. George Atzerodt will strike down Vice President Andrew Johnson at his hotel. 3 attacks, all planned for the same hour. A single night meant to throw the Union into chaos. By 2 p.m., the cabinet meeting ends. General Grant explains to Lincoln that he and his wife will not be joining the president at the theater that evening. They are leaving to Washington to see their children. Lincoln accepts the decision without protest. Instead, he heads to lunch with Mary. Not long after, Lincoln signs a pardon for a young army deserter. He sets down his pen and mutters almost to himself, "Well, I think the boy can do us more good above ground than underground." A single act of mercy, one of many on this final day. But while Lincoln offers forgiveness, Booth sharpens his knife and conceals his pistol. 2 men, 2 paths, both moving toward the same night. By 5 p.m., the president and Mary climb into their carriage for a short ride. She notices how cheerful he seems. He tells her, "This day, the war has come to a close. We must both be more cheerful in the future." By 6 p.m., the Lincolns return to the White House. Old friends from Illinois stop in, and for a while, there's laughter and stories. But soon, dinner is called, and the president sits down with Mary. That evening, their guests for the theater are confirmed: Major Henry Rathbone and his fiancée, Clara Harris. At 8:30 p.m., they arrive at Ford's Theater. The play has already begun, but when the president enters, the orchestra strikes up "Hail to the Chief." The audience rises, cheering, as Lincoln takes his seat in the decorated state box. The play named Our American Cousin is already in full swing. In the presidential box, Mary sits close beside her husband. Downstairs, Officer John Parker, assigned to guard the president. But he leaves his post and slips into the saloon next door. The doorway to the box is left unguarded. John Wilkes Booth moves through the theater. He knows every hallway and stair. He climbs quietly to the president's box. With a wooden bar, he blocks the door so no one can enter. Through a small hole he carved earlier, he looks inside. Lincoln is sitting calmly, watching the play. At 10:15 p.m., the audience bursts into loud laughter. Booth sees his chance. He steps inside, aims his pistol, and fires into the back of Lincoln's head. The president falls forward. Major Rathbone jumps up to stop Booth, but Booth slashes him with a knife. Then he leaps from the balcony. He breaks his leg as he hits the stage, but he stands and shouts, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants, and runs off. The theatre is in shock. Some think it's part of the play, but Mary's cries cut through the confusion. They've shot the president. The theatre erupts in panic. People scream and rush for the exits. Some climb over seats, trying to see what has happened. Inside the box, Lincoln is slumped in his chair. Rathbone bleeds from the knife wound on his arm. A young army doctor named Charles Leal pushes his way through the crowd. He climbs into the box and checks the president. He finds the wound behind Lincoln's ear. The injury is fatal, but Lincoln is still breathing. He decides Lincoln cannot be taken back to the White House. The ride would kill him. Instead, they carry him carefully out of the theater. The crowd outside watches in silence as soldiers and doctors move slowly across the street. They bring Lincoln into the Peterson House, a small boarding house across from Ford's Theater. They lay him on a narrow bed. All through the night, doctors check his breathing, clear blood clots, and try to keep him alive. They know there is no hope because the bullet is too deep. Mary comes in and out of the room, unable to stay by his side for long. The president's son sits quietly near the bed. Cabinet members arrive. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton takes charge. He begins questioning witnesses, directing the manhunt for Booth, and recording every detail. While Lincoln struggles for life, the other attacks unfold. Lewis Powell storms into the Secretary of State William Seward's home and stabs him, but Seward survives. George Atzerodt, who was assigned to kill Vice President Johnson, loses his nerve and does nothing. Booth's plan to destroy the government fails, but only Lincoln has been struck. The night turns into morning. Inside the Peterson house, Abraham Lincoln still lies unconscious. His breathing is slow and he never opens his eyes. But there's nothing doctors can do. At 7:22 a.m., April 15th, 1865, Abraham Lincoln took his final breath at the age of 56. After a moment, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton speaks the words that would be remembered forever. Now he belongs to the ages. Lincoln's body is placed in a simple coffin, covered with an American flag, and taken back to the White House. John Wilkes Booth escaped into the night. With a broken leg, he rode across the Navy Yard Bridge and fled south into Maryland. For 12 days, he hid in forests, barns, and swamps. Friends and Confederate supporters gave him food and shelter, but soldiers were searching everywhere. On April 26, 1865, Union troops finally cornered Booth in a barn in Virginia. He refused to surrender. The soldiers set the barn on fire. A single shot struck him in the neck. As he lay dying, Booth whispered his last words, "Useless. Useless." The other conspirators were caught and put on trial. Lewis Powell, who attacked Secretary of State Seward, was captured quickly. George Atzerodt, who failed to kill Vice President Johnson, was arrested in Maryland. David Herold, who helped Booth escape, was taken with him at the barn. Mary Surratt, who owned the boarding house where the plans were made, was also arrested. On July 7, 1865, 4 of them were hanged in Washington. Others were sent to prison for life. The conspiracy had failed. Lincoln was the only one killed.